All right, we'll go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everyone and thank you for joining today's webinar. Is your plan ready to meet the website accessibility compliance deadline? My name is Jessica Ransom, Education Associate with NCPERS, and I'll be your moderator today. With a background in education program planning, I've seen how essential accessibility is to ensuring that all individuals can fully engage with digital content. I'm grateful to be a part of the NCPERS team and hosting this important conversation today. With the April 2026 ADA compliance deadline approaching, today's session will cover what these rules may mean for your organization, practical steps to prepare for digital accessibility, and case examples from systems already navigating redesign projects. For our layout for this session, just so you can be familiar, I'll pass it over to Diane and Ryan for speaker introductions. Then we'll go into our presentation and then case study examples and recommendations, and then we'll transition into a Q&A at the end. Today's webinar is being recorded and the slide deck is available on our website. This program is eligible for one SHRM PDC and one CE hour toward AF recertification. Please feel free to submit questions at any time through the Q&A box. It should be at the bottom of your screen. And with that, I'll turn it over to our speakers. I'll let each of you introduce yourselves and share your connection to this topic. Diane and Ryan, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Jessica. Hi, everyone. We're excited to be here. My name is Diane Swisher, and I serve as a Senior Vice President of Communications at Segal Benz, which is the HR and benefits communication group at Segal. Accessibility is a hot topic with our public sector clients these days. So today we'll be exploring what accessibility, why it matters, what it means to your organization, how you can prepare for the upcoming compliance deadlines. Ryan and I will also be sharing some real life examples of how to implement best practices and make it easy for you to get started. So with that, Ryan, I'll pass it over to you for a quick introduction.
Thanks, Diane. Hey, y'all, I'm Ryan Woodhouse. I'm the Content and Publications Manager here at the Fire and Police Pension Association in Colorado. I lead a team of 3, sometimes 4 folks working on all of our digital and printed communications. Like many of us here today, our communication staff is pretty lean and mean, so I'm excited to share how we as an organization have been tackling compliance and share some of our insights. Let's get started.
Great, sounds good. Thank you. So in today's technology-driven world, digital accessibility is more important than ever. Every day, people rely on websites, apps, online resources to do their work, to learn, to connect, and access essential services. And my guess is that probably just before today's call, most people on the call were using their phone to do something like to check in with a friend, check their balances, pay a bill, make an appointment, order food. The list can go on and on, right? But for individuals with disabilities, including visual, auditory, and some of the others that you see listed on this slide, it could be a real challenge if the content isn't set up with the accessibility in mind. And I have some firsthand experience with how difficult everyday tasks can be for someone who has a disability. My father was legally blind, and during his career, technology was not necessarily at the level that it is as advanced as it is today. But it's definitely difficult for him to navigate simple things like calling a 1-800 number and navigating through that phone tree, or downloading forms and filling the forms out for doctor appointments. Using an ATM machine to withdraw money, looking at pictures of his grandkids on email. He dedicated his career to working for the New Jersey Commission of the Blind, and his role was to help high school students transition to college and then to professional careers, because he believed that everyone should have the opportunity and the tools to support them on their journey, no matter what their ability is. And based on my experience of that growing up, and then helping my father later in his years in his life, the accessibility of information and resources is something that's a real priority to me. It ensures that everyone, regardless of their ability, can fully participate in our society. It's not just about compliance, it's about making the content usable for all. And when that happens, it's good business, but it also expands your audience, improves the experience for everyone, and basically demonstrates your organization's commitment to social responsibility. So we thought that'd be interesting to start off and get with some examples and some context. So as we look at this example, imagine viewing these images as someone with color blindness. For many people, colors that seem distinct to most viewers, like reds and greens and yellows, can appear almost identical or muted. On this slide, you can see that notice the pictures that rely on color to convey information or differentiate elements, it all looks the same. So across the top's normal vision, across the bottom is the colorblind example. So it could mean that content online could be confusing or misleading for someone who might be colorblind if important details or instructions are communicated only through color. That's why it's essential to use things like high contrast styling, clear labels, alternative cues, so everyone can understand the content regardless of how they perceive color. Those are just a few accessibility features, and as we go through today's presentation, we'll call out others as we go through the slides. We've got one more example for visual disabilities, and it's important to note that they exist on a spectrum. So not everyone with a visual impairment is necessarily complete blindness. Many people have limited or partial vision, and then the degree of impairment can vary widely. So for example, my father would describe his vision to be like the one in the third box over. He would tell us, like, if you completely cover your eye with one hand and then do like this with your other and look through it, that was basically his level of vision. So think about that and using your phone and how the last transaction that you completed on your phone or on the computer, now trying to imagine doing that with some type of reduced vision. It'd be very difficult. And do you think you'd be able to get to the end result that you wanted? So that's why features like high contrast, clear text descriptions, compatibility with screen readers are so critical. So we wanted to use these examples as a way to set the context and help everyone have some real life experience with it. So now we certainly recognize that the range of disabilities varies. So we thank you for considering those couple with us, those couple perspectives. With this in mind, we're going to dive into the main portion of our presentation, and we'll explore some more practical strategy, what the specific guidelines are, and then some solutions. Okay, so you may have, everybody's here today because the ADA rules that are pending to go into effect early next year, but it's also important to start with a foundation of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG. It's an internationally recognized set of standards that are maintained by the World Wide Web Consortium, and the guidelines define what it means for web content to be accessible. And they outline 3 benchmarks, so it's either A, AA, or AAA, and each represents a deeper commitment to accessibility. They cover essential qualities of web online content like perceivability, operations, understanding, the technology behind that runs the websites. It basically ensures that websites and digital content are usable by everyone regardless of ability. So understanding the WCAG is crucial because this forms the basis for many accessibility laws and regulations, including the ADA, and then the ADA rules reference the WCAG standards, but they are separate entities. So the WCAG provides the technical framework, while the ADA establishes the legal requirements for compliance. So by starting with the WCAG, we set the context for what accessibility means in practice. And then that helps us better understand how the ADA applies these standards and what organizations need to do to meet both the technical and legal expectations. So the WCAG created a framework, and they created a handy acronym for that framework called POUR. So it stands for perceivable. That's the first part. It means that everyone should be able to access the information, even if they can't see, hear, or process it in the usable way. For example, providing text alternatives for images helps people who use screen readers. It should be operable. This is all about, making sure that users can navigate the site if they're using a keyboard or voice commands or other types of assistive technologies. It also means avoiding things like flashing visuals that could trigger seizures. Understandable is pretty straightforward. It's about making your content clear and easy to follow. As a communications professional, that one's my favorite. It means using simple language and keeping the user experience consistent throughout the site and helping users avoid mistakes like broken links or 504 errors. And finally, robust is more about the back-end technology of your website, making sure that works with current technology and future technology. So if someone's using a newer version of a screen reader or browser, the content should still be accessible. Okay, so now we're going to go through some practical steps. We'll start with the rules and deadlines. And we suspect that the reason most of the folks are here on the call today is because of these rules and deadlines and these new compliance standards from the Title II rule that's going into effect over the next year or two. So broadly speaking, the rules require state and local governments to ensure that their entire web presence complies with those WCAG 2.1 AA standards by April 2026 or 2027, depending on the size of the population that you serve. It's also important to keep in mind that there might be state-specific laws and related to accessibility, or the state might enact something in the future. For example, that's the case in Colorado, and Ryan's going to go into some more detail around that in a later slide. And thinking ahead, state governments could also choose to go beyond the federal standard and require 2.2 AA compliance, which is already out, or 3.0 guidance, which is going to be released in the near future. There are some exemptions that you should keep in mind too as you plan your accessibility strategy. For example, archive web content, pre-existing electronic documents that aren't actively used for public services are usually exempt. Part of the planning process, you'll hear Ryan talk about this as well, is include like a review of your entire site and make sure that all the content is still relevant. The same goes for third-party content posted on your site, unless there's a contractual arrangement with the provider that they give you accessible ready documents. Anything that's password protected or related to an individual's account or property, and older social media posts also fall outside the scope of these rules. So understanding these exemptions is important. It helps you focus your efforts where they need to be most and ensures your resources are used most efficiently. So as you move forward, be sure to consider what content is covered and what isn't when building your accessibility plan. And you can also use that as an opportunity to establish guidelines for your content management. With that, Ryan, I will pass it over to you and you can take us through a case study.
Excellent. Thank you, Diane.
Welcome.
Tiny? Jess, were you jumping in? No? All right.
Yes,
Let's go with.
I was sorry. I was actually gonna jump in. We had a few questions come in. What is the definition of archived web content?
Sure, I can take a stab at this one. I know that the standards do differ a little bit from federal versus what we're seeking to do in Colorado. But a great resource for this is the ada.gov resource site that runs down in plain language what the different standards are, what the exemptions are, all of those bits. But my understanding based on reading that, again, go check it, maybe have your legal team look at it as well. But archived content typically has to be older than a certain date, be used in order to get the exemption, also needs to be held specifically for like reference material, older materials, and then also saved in some kind of an archive portal or all in like a separate repository within your site. Again, go check those rules specifically, maybe have legal look at them too. But at a high level, that's the way that I currently understand it. But your mileage may vary on that.
All right, thanks so much, Ryan. Just wanted to pop in there because it was mentioned on the last slide, but turning it back over to you.
Okay, great question. So let's first, just a tiny bit of background about FPPA. We provide DB and DC benefits for active and retired first responders and their beneficiaries in Colorado. We currently have just under $8 billion in assets under management. Our full staff is around 70. Our content and publications team are two super talented individuals, and also me. Hey, Clarissa, what's up, Lo? We also have one other staff member on the admin side, Andrea, working mostly on our board and committee materials for when they have to be posted online as well. We began our accessibility journey in 2024 in response to a recent law passed in Colorado, which required compliance to actually the same standard to WCAG. Often you'll hear people refer to it as WCAG. So if I do that, that's what I mean. We are also, as of this year, required to meet that same standard alongside all state agencies that had separate effective dates in both 2024 and 2025, kind of ratcheting up the level of compliance. Today, we're going to talk through the process of updating our main website, fppaco.org, with its roughly 70 pages. When we started, we had on those pages an average accessibility score of 85 out of 100, which sounds good, but still left a lot of work for us to do to get to full compliance. At the beginning, you'll also see that we were hosting approximately 350 PDFs with just a lot of fails. Difficult to quantify that one, but it was a lot. So plenty of work for us to do. Next slide, please.
And when you look at those numbers, the 70 pages, 350 PDFs, that's when it's really good to know what content should be archived, because then you can really focus.
Yes, great point.
Okay.
So here's a look at our transformation of the homepage specifically, and then we'll talk about how we got there. You see here 3 screenshots of our website over time. The first, technically from 2021, you can see our cool little COVID shout out in the center. But this is actually pretty close in style and structure to what we had when we began working towards compliance. You'll see it's a little small, but if you get right up against your screen, you'll see the light gray top navigation, light green and light blue headlines, and links throughout. That were definitely not going to pass color contrast standards at a minimum. And then we had many different issues going on in the back end with structure and the ways that screen readers interacted with the site as well that we had to address that aren't as easy to show visually here in screenshots. The second screenshot you see here, we did an immediate facelift for the first phase of Colorado's law to fix those immediate contrast and structure concerns. We also worked to improve the compliance score of our documents, and in making those changes to the site, saw our compliance scores for our pages increase quite a bit. The final screenshot is our homepage in its current form, where we still roughly have about 70 pages on the site, but both our pages and our documents are much, much more compliant and accessible for folks that do need a little bit of assistance. Let's move on to the next slide, please. This is another side-by-side to show how our PDFs transitioned over time as we began properly tagging them. The important thing to look at here is the right panel on the side of each of the documents that shows the accessibility tags. You can see the 2024 version of our annual newsletter had very few tags. It was improperly structured. And the second screenshot shows our most recent newsletter. This one is properly structured, set up with tags and proper reading order. That's a very important thing that you do within the tags of your document. For anyone who's new to this, the reading order set for your document dictates how a screen reader is going to navigate through your document. You set that yourself when you're building the document or remediating if you have to do it after the fact. Ideally, you want your reading order to follow a logical path through the document. So starting with a headline, then to any subheadline that might be in a page or within a document, and then your body text and other supporting information. Typical, but it's up to you to set it based on how you interpret or would think that a person would want to consume this document. But that reading order can easily get shuffled around during the document creation or remediation process. So that's an important piece of work that goes into any document building or remediation process. Next slide, please.
Ryan, just one point too, I thought it was interesting when we were on the webinar last week and they gave the example of how a screen reader works. So that it's not just necessarily the tagging for reading order, but it's also readability. So they showed what it sounded like without being tagged appropriately. And not only was the reading order all out of sorts, but it also took words and like smashed all the words together. So it didn't even sound like logical words or English, right? It's just it was like making up words too. So I thought that was something that was new and unexpected for me that I learned on that.
Certainly, thank you. So how do you get started? I mean, I know that the process to achieve compliance can be daunting. It certainly was for us. So what I'm going to try and do over the next several slides is give you the path that we wish we had when we started, that we kind of figured out along the way. And then where we are now, talk about how to maintain a compliant posture for your online presence once you get there. So at a very high level, we'll get through each of these in detail, but at a high level, we're going to first set a baseline. We're going to develop and work through a plan. We're going to learn the standards and figure out how to apply them to our materials. We're going to talk about how to work with your different vendors or third-party contributors to get accessible documents from them, and then talk about the path forward and updating your processes once compliant. So we got to start with a baseline. Essentially, at this point, we need to know, just to start, we need to know how many of our online properties are compliant and to what degree that they're compliant. So we are going to take stock. We are going to scan all the parts of your online presence. This is your website, your documents, videos. We're going to do a scan for proper closed captioning, a mobile app, anything that you have that lives online, to determine whether or not those properties need to be made accessible. Important here to document along the way, create a spreadsheet, log the progress so that you can set milestones and stay on track. Specific tools that we used here, the Lighthouse checker that's built into browsers like Chrome and Edge. That works well for single web pages and is the image at the top right of your screen. You can see that's the first report we ran for our homepage, that 2021 screenshot a couple slides ago. That score of 80, we were like, great, we got a good start. But that did actually still come with about 15 pages worth of individual items that we had to address. One really cool thing in these reports that we like is that they do walk you through every single item that counts against your score, as well as giving links to learn more about the applicable WCAG standard and the steps that you need to take to fix it. There are other checkers that you can use that scan your entire site for a fee. Accessibilitychecker.org is a good one for that, but there certainly are others. For documents, we found great success with the Common Look PDF validator. That works within Adobe Acrobat as a plugin. Another good option is the PAC accessibility checker. Both of those, unfortunately, are Windows-based. So my Mac friends, you're going to run into a few headaches when we get to this step, perhaps. The lower right screen down here, the lower right image in your screen, though, that is with the little call-out box, that's a typical document report when we started. This is a single document, 28 pages with well over 200 fails and a bunch of other items that we had to look at in the document. Another important part at this step is to look at your videos. If you have videos hosted in places like YouTube or Vimeo, do they have closed captioning that you've already set up for them? If not, does the platform that you're using have the option to automatically close caption for you? If so, turn that on. That's your baseline. It's not perfect, probably, but at least it can get you in the right direction. And then in the future, revisit your closed captions for accuracy and update them as needed wherever it fits within your process. On the next slide now, we'll talk a little bit about the plan and timeline. I want you to understand at this point that your process might be different based on your own needs. I'm sharing what worked for us, but your mileage might vary. As you get a handle on the status of your content and the standards themselves, the WCAG standards, you can begin to evaluate the expected workload and begin looking at your capabilities, find out, guesstimate how equipped your team is to work towards achieving compliance. And that can help inform if you want a do-it-yourself or a do-it-for-me type of approach, working with vendors or consultants, or some combination of the two. Important here to start securing whatever resources you need. Are there other groups in your organization that are going to help support your plan? Identify who those people are and what tools they're going to need. One cool thing that we didn't expect coming into this that we found was this was an opportunity for us to downsize our online presence. do you need all of the pages, documents, and videos that you have posted online? Like a couple of slides back, you saw that we had 350 documents on our website when we started this process. After going through them all, we discovered that we didn't need them all. We didn't need decades of annual reports and board minutes and other items that people weren't accessing, that folks didn't need. We saw that they weren't using it. We didn't need them as reference material. We weren't legally required to keep them up. So we took them down in order to streamline and downsize our presence. And that certainly helped reduce our workload along the way to achieve compliance. Then you want to start thinking about your remediation order for the documents you currently have. We started with lists from Google Analytics of our most viewed content to help us set our priorities. Now, you see there's an asterisk here because, at least in my opinion, the actual order should depend a little bit based on the complexity of your most viewed pages and PDFs. Like, for example, if your most viewed PDF on your website is a giant annual financial report full of charts and graphs and tables, items that might make it difficult to remediate, that could end up being an absolute momentum killer. And it might be a better starting point to start with something else from that list. Give it like a simple form or something that's word-based so that you can build up some momentum, gain some confidence, get yourself going on this process. And finally, you want to identify your tools. And we'll cover that more in a later slide. So let's move on to...
I was just going to say, part of this process too, especially around that third bullet, you kind of goes into a content management process and system too, right? As you're reviewing all this, then you can come up with a content governance if you don't have one already. So it's kind of a nice way that leads into other, starting to work on this leads into other strategies too that can just improve the efficiency of the overall content.
Mhm.
And if you've been tracking analytics too over the the years of your website, that can help with the order and what's their highest priority as well.
Sure, totally. And it
That's
can be
what we
significant.
found. Yeah.
It can be significant too. We went from 350 PDFs to, as of yesterday, 201. So we cut a really good chunk of documents that we just didn't need. On the next slide here, sorry?
I was just saying it's like a big cleanup of the site because files tend to be put out there and not necessarily replaced or looked back on, and they just keep getting added over the years. So that's what we found, is that it's a nice cleanup process as well.
Totally, definitely. Let's talk a little bit more about how to learn these standards. There are a lot. There are, to put it technically, a ton of individual components in the web content accessibility guidelines, and they can be complicated. They can be confusing. So this is going to be where a large portion of time is going to be spent if you elect to remediate and produce your own accessible documents going forward. If you've elected to do that, to take on this web and document remediation process, this is where you want to start studying what those standards are and learning the techniques and best practices in order to build up your internal skill set. This is where you're going to start to learn to remediate the pages and documents that you have and build new ones to be compliant when you publish them. We talked a bit about the Learn More links in the various web accessibility reports. Don't snooze on those. But also, there's a pretty robust accessibility community online, especially on YouTube. Some of the users we found very helpful are listed on your screen. You could also consider a long-form training here. One that we've found a ton of value in was Creative Pro. They put on an annual accessibility summit over multiple days, many different sessions, some very concrete and robust topics that is available on demand after the fact. So if you missed it this year, it was in September, you can still go and access all of the content on there after you register. You could also look for resources from state or federal agencies. For example, one that helped us a lot was after the law passed, the Colorado Governor's Office of Information Technology published very helpful accessibility basics and website toolkit documents that you could go find right now if you wanted. Next slide, please. Great, we've arrived at FPPA's official accessibility tool power rankings. No, not really, but this is a non-exhaustive list of tools that we found most helpful, especially for remediating documents. But it's important to note that the important step here is to find something that works and works well for you and stick with it. For most of our document work, we utilize a suite of tools called Common Look. Their parent company is Alliant. And from them, we use the PDF, the free PDF validator that we mentioned earlier to check documents. But we also use a couple others. Common Look PDF is a great tool for remediations. It's web-based, so it's good for both PC and Mac users. This one is a validator, a tag editor, and has some wizard tools in it. So as you're working through a document, if something fails while you scan it, it has built-in tools to help you fix the issue right then. This suite also has a Microsoft Office plugin for Windows users specifically, but that works directly within your Word document or your PowerPoint or wherever you're doing work in Microsoft Office to help you create an accessible document and also to export it properly. So you retain all the important metadata and structure elements, all the things that live in the backend that help your document to be accessible. Excuse me. I should note here that Common Look is a little bit expensive, but we found that it is worth it, especially since it includes a robust knowledge base, regular product trainings with Q&A, and actual office hours where you can bring your questions directly to their training staff who work in this program and on accessible documents all the time. It should also be noted here that most or maybe all validators don't check your sites or documents for color contrast. So an actual color contrast checker is important. It's an important part of your workflow. This is still a manual check. So be sure to include that in your workflows. A couple of options that we have worked with are on your screen. And finally, on this slide, you might consider using a screen reader yourself as part of your workflow. This can be helpful so that you can do one of two things or both, to experience your documents and websites in the same way that someone who is vision impaired might, or to verify whether or not you're truly meeting the standard, whether or not people can actually do what you want them to do, be able to do with your documents and your website. The industry standard here is called JAWS, Job Access with Sound. But there's also built-in readers in most of the major web browsers or in Adobe Acrobat that can be helpful here as well. There are some others to consider, as we said. It's just me saying it, but there are plenty of others options in here. We have seen other folks in our space get achieve success with Grackle as one, but there certainly are others to consider. Let's go to the next slide, where this is the point where I want to talk about what it's like to actually do the work. The reality here is that the learning curve will likely be steep in this process, and it will probably take longer than you think, especially if you're starting from scratch. That was certainly our story. The whole team over here was essentially brand new to this process, to all of the standards we had to meet, the processes we had to follow. And it was at times confusing. It caused literal headaches, plenty of frustration. But it is important, and it is crucial to stick with it. And if you can, take your time, start small, like we talked about, to build some momentum, build some confidence as you take on what could be, depending on the size of your online presence, a pretty heavy workload. I should also mention a couple of things that cause those headaches for us. There is no standard accessibility testing tool. More importantly, none of the tools that we're going to use in this process are perfect. So the tool that you work in most commonly might give you a false positive or false negative result for your document or your web page. And both of those are bad. You don't want false positives or false negatives. So in reality, it might take more than one checker or a screen reader and a checker or some combination of these elements to determine the actual accessibility level of your document or web page. There's also no official certificate for compliance. There's no governing body with a checker that can tell you whether you're compliant or not. And this is another reason to keep your documentation, log your process, your progress, in case you ever have to defend yourself and how you got to the accessible level that you're at.
That's definitely something we've experienced too, is the false negatives. So you have a page, it comes up through a tool throwing errors. You look at the code seems to be standard. So then you run it through a second tool. And then in that case, most times it comes out as it's correct. So And it's also not just a one and done, right? Like, so you kind of get yourself started, you get yourself set up, and then it's an ongoing process. So it becomes a multi-year implementation too.
Mm-hmm. Totally. From the early part of this process, one thing, if you're just starting or maybe getting into this a little bit more, a large, a source of so many headaches is tables. For whatever
Yes.
reason, screen readers have a really hard time with tables. And when we started this, we got so many fails for improper header rows in tables when we could go into the document and see there's a header row there. And it became just a huge headache that, if anyone's dealing with that right now, I feel you. I feel your pain. Stick with it, find a way to fix it, and move forward, or at least be able to document that you are passing. Right. So depending on your individual needs, there are a lot of vendors in this space. As you take a look at your capabilities, the expected workload, figure out what it is you need and seek out folks that might be able to help you, whether that's consultants or other providers, educators, people to actually work on your documents, remediating them for you. Whatever you need, certainly go find it. I can speak to the two types that we've used. In 2024, when we started our journey, we actually happened to be at that same time evaluating providers for a relaunch of our website. So, in looking at different providers, we opted to go with one that was built on an accessible framework, had accessible page templates, and then also the provider that we went with, their name is Streamline. They had built-in page and document scanning within the backend. That could help us to know the current status of our pages and documents, but then also manage the reports that they were keeping for us in the backend for those different materials, so we could have all of our material in one place. On a very limited basis, we have also utilized a third-party vendor to remediate documents for us. Our specific use for this was a set of forms that were pretty robust, but that we also knew we were never going to update again. They belonged to a process which we have since automated. But in that case, we opted to have them remediated by a third party. In this case, it was Common Look, who we've mentioned before, but that saved us a bunch of headaches and time in remediating that set of documents that we knew we were never going to have to touch again. And at the time, just the level set, that cost us about $7 per page. For third parties, if you have third-party content providers who are submitting documents or content for your site, maybe for board or committee meeting materials, request accessible documents from those folks. It may or may not, I'm not super familiar with this part of the ADA standard. For us in Colorado, it is required, so it could happen at any time if there were additional laws or rules passed. So if this is important, if this is something that you see that you have third-party content on your site, consider requesting accessible documents from those folks and do it early. It is no guarantee that those folks are going to be any more better versed in meeting compliance standards than you are. So give them as much time as you can and have those conversations early. For us, in actually getting compliance from those folks, we leaned a lot on the relationships between our legal and executive teams and their counterparts at those third parties to establish the need and secure their compliance, explain that this is a thing we are required to do by law. We need you as partners. We're here to help you, but this is something we need to get done. And ultimately, we were able to get our third parties on board by having conversations that went in that type of structure. And then going forward, make it a part of your RFPs. Make it required that folks that are going to provide content to you in the future, that they're required to, and according to, and make that something they have to bid for in their RFPs. This will make your life so much easier so that you're not struggling to make items compliant the day before your board materials are due. Okay, let's go on to the next slide, the finish line, kind of, except not really at all, because like all great processes, now that we're here, this is a process that we're going to be doing forever. We expect that we'll be working on these different standards as long as we continue to post information online. So after reaching compliance, we'll want to continue to rescan pages anytime you make updates or post a new page with your documents. Same deal when you're making updates or posting new ones. You got to make sure you're scanning them and keeping your documentation, again, just in case you ever have to protect yourself. Where it's appropriate, as you're remediating, you'll want to update your document templates so that when you have to create updates to those documents in the future, you're able to streamline that process to make your documents accessible. And with all new items that you're going to design with accessibility in mind. Be thinking about how you're going to make a page or a document accessible as you're laying it out. Give yourself a leg up when it comes to compliance on the final product. Another super important item here, this one should be bolded, reset your expectations. Because the reality is that new content that you produce starting now is going to take longer and have extra steps added to your workflow. So reset your expectations with staff about how long things are going to take so that nobody gets blindsided and they give you enough runway so that you can produce and publish things on time. Also super important is training your staff. If you have staff that regularly contribute to or produce documents that end up on your website, invest in whatever tools and training they might need so that they can help produce and submit documents that are either ready to publish right when they hit your inbox, or you can maybe just do a simple final remediation to get that up online. And with that, I have run out of words. Let's pass it back to Diane and Jessica.
That's great. Jessica, do we want to pause here and check for any questions that might have come in?
Sure, yes, we can.
Great.
So we had a few questions come in centered around what is a passing score for a PDF? Are we looking for 100%, 95% for everything? What is a passing score?
Each score is correlated to those A ratings, right? Single A, double A, or triple A. Right. I don't know if you want to share like the scores that you had and what they related to give an idea of the range, maybe for the tools that you use at least.
Sure. The 90, like the 1 to 100 scale ratings, typically in our experience, those relate specifically to websites. A lot of times with documents specifically, it's pass or fail. And if there's one item out of the hundreds that they check for that fails, it will pop as a fail in your report. So, I mean, strictly speaking, as I understand it, in order to be 100% compliant, a 100 score on a web page or a past rating on a document would be the standard. What I will share is that in Colorado, the guidance that we've received from the governor's office of IT related to our state law has been more, especially after the law officially went into effect, about good faith and progress rather than like rigid perfection. At this point, they're putting more effort on, or emphasis on demonstrating that effort and progress with a plan to get to full compliance if you're not fully there yet. And hopefully we can see similar guidance at the federal level. And this also goes back to the fact that there's no standard compliance checker for either, right? So we can't say for absolute certain that anything is passing anywhere ever. I'm being a little dramatic, but you get kind of the idea. There's no standard checker to know for sure that you're passing. So I think that's why at least the state that we're operating in has kind of relaxed that standard a little bit. Say, hey, are you getting there? Are you making progress? Can you show that you're better today than you were yesterday? And great, keep going, do the best you can.
And the good thing about the tools too is that if something does fail, it's usually a very specific description of why, and then a link to the rule that's related to that. So it doesn't leave you guessing what needs to be fixed. It usually guides you down, the report's results guide you down the path of figuring it out.
All right. Staying in line with the question that we just answered, we had a few questions come in about different tools and maybe, how easy they are to use and different things like that. Would you mind, Ryan, would you mind going back to your set a baseline slide and maybe give a refresher of those tools and takeaways for those in the audience who may be interested in more information?
Sure. We're talking specifically about the baseline or the tools to use to remediate and create documents?
The baseline, and then we
Okay.
can go into the next slide that have more information on like the documents.
Sure. Okay, so speaking broadly about websites, our first website, you probably noticed it was pretty simple. It was basically HTML based, some ARIA elements, a carousel on the homepage, but for the most part, very, very simple. We managed that in Dreamweaver, just using basic HTML updates. And so for that, we were scanning that site in Lighthouse predominantly because we were looking at the individual fails for individual pages. So the Lighthouse is built into browsers like Chrome and Edge, and it exists to check your site for a number of things, performance and other standards, as well as accessibility. But to check the accessibility standards in there, it'll spit out a report kind of like the top right corner of the screen that will contain a full list of all the different elements that failed, and then the links within those elements to show what why it failed that particular element, and then how to fix it, which we were able to then go by modifying the code in Dreamweaver. There are some that do check your entire site. That would be something like accessibilitychecker.org can look at your whole site all at once. And then on PDFs, we utilize Common Look PDF most often. That's the Adobe Acrobat plugin. That can show you a long list of all the different items. One thing that's nice in there compared to some is that it shows not just your failed items, but it will show all the things that passed, things that need more attention, things that the checker is not totally sure about, that are warnings that you should go and look at yourself, evaluate on your own with a screen reader or with your knowledge of best practices. So that one's great, as well as the PAC accessibility checker. Excuse me.
And then there was one other slide, Jessica, too, that we want to go to.
Yes, the I think it was like 2 slides up from this one. Yep, this one.
Probably
This
one more.
Okay.
Not a T. All right. Let's go one more to talk about specific tools. There we go. The tools that we utilize here for remediation specifically, Common Look is the product suite. The parent company is Alliant. That includes the PDF validator that we just discussed, but also an online validator, tag editor, and tool to use to remediate your documents. That one's called Common Look PDF. That has 2 different modes that you can adjust and modify your document in. A simplified editor that basically wipes out tag structure if you have one. A lot of times helpful for documents that don't have any tags at all, that would be difficult to go in and auto tag or complete the whole tag structure on your own. The simplified editor allows you to drag different boxes and assign values to like the elements within a specific page. So that can be a little more user-friendly for someone who's just getting started. But the real winner to make an accessible document that's going to be long-lasting and its latest and greatest form would be the advanced editor. That does allow you to scan your report, scan your document, but then also see where it's failing and gives you tools right there in that application to fix the document, fix the tags that are failing. Another cool part about this suite is the Microsoft Office plugin. So you can use this directly on Windows within Microsoft Office. That allows you to create an accessible document. Will tell you if there's things in your document that aren't passing or that need attention to make your document accessible, but then also allows you to export it properly so you keep the important meta and structured data within it. Once you get a little further versed, it's a little difficult to be working directly on tags in Adobe Acrobat right away, but Adobe Acrobat can be helpful for direct tag fixing later on. And then we talked about a color contrast checker to make sure that you're maintaining proper contrast between your foreground and your background with text specifically. And WebAIM and TPGI, the first one is web-based and TPGI is an application that can both help you, they can both help to look at the individual background and foreground elements of your documents and pages. And we talked finally about screen readers and whether that would be a good option for checking your documents, or if you wanted to be better versed in experiencing your documents and pages the way that someone who needs a screen reader might, someone who can't necessarily see a document or a page that you're presenting to the world. JAWS, Job Access with Sound, is the industry standard here, but there are other options, and it might be good to at least be familiar with a few others because there's no guarantee that someone who's using a screen reader is using JAWS. They might be going for something that's free in their web browser, like Chrome or Edge. They both have them, and so does like Adobe Acrobat. So maybe having familiarity with more than one screen reader is also helpful here to make sure that you're testing these documents and sites in different environments.
Thanks, Ryan.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for doing a refresher on those two slides. Some of the key takeaways, obviously, for this webinar is to see the different tools that are out there. What are other people using? So thank you so much for that. And then one final question on like the tools. So we had an attendee mention our website management team recently ran an accessibility audit and the results were positive. Do you think we should use some of these resources you shared on our own to make sure it's consistent with their findings? So can you talk to the importance of having these tools and consistently, using them?
Sure, I think that's great. If you had, I'm assuming this means it was a third party that conducted an audit on the site to determine its current accessibility status. I would certainly recommend, if you're going to do this work yourself, to make updates if you have the capacity in-house. It could be very valuable for you to run, say, the Lighthouse report or an accessibilitychecker.org report so that you can see the individual elements that it's failing for, and then click on the learn more link to learn more about it. And hopefully that'll enable you to do the work yourself, to educate on exactly what it is that's wrong and how you can fix it.
Thanks, Ryan. And then
To
to
your,
shift. Oh, sure. Go ahead, Diane.
I was just going to say, to the earlier point, Ryan, that you made too, that person who asked that question is still able to demonstrate that they're putting in a good faith effort by running the reports that they have now too. So that's something to keep in the back of mind too.
Yep.
Mm.
And then shifting gears a bit from the tools conversation and just opening this up with more of a baseline question. We presented the opportunity for this webinar, for all of for everyone, but we specifically did a extra call out to our HR professionals group. And we had a question come in. Is web accessibility compliance mainly a job of communications department in an organization?
I think it's a shared one, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
The strategy might sit with one group, and then the planning, and then the any kind of remediation technical backend could sit with some technical group. So it's definitely part of an overall, it should definitely be part of an overall communication strategy for sure.
Mm-hmm.
That those groups work with the other resources throughout the organization to make it, to implement.
Yep.
Yeah, certainly.
Agreed.
I think this depends on who's doing the work on these,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like in our organization, my team that I work on, we manage all of our public facing sites. So so that work fell on us. But if you had, say, dedicated front end developers or back end developers, part of your IT team, that might mean that part of this lives with them, right? We might, as in our staff, we have one member of our accessibility team who's not in my immediate team, who is the person who collects and publishes our board materials. So any packets or third-party materials coming in, she's in charge of those. So she also needed to be very well versed in these standards and how to remediate documents.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another part that's not necessarily strictly in a communications type of group.
Yep.
And then also we talked about how if there are other folks anywhere in the organization that are submitting materials that either go online wholesale or contribute to documents or materials that go online, they should, in a perfect world, be well versed enough in these standards that they can produce their own accessible documents, so that
Mm-hmm.
hopefully when it comes to whoever is publishing it, then it's either mostly or completely compliant so that we can get it done faster. So the last thing we want is to finally hit a deadline, a document, yay, we're happy we got it done, but then we have to spend half a day remediating it and we miss the deadline.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got
Agreed.
the whole design team too. If somebody's working on a
Totally.
PDF, designing a graphic or a more visual type of document, the designers on that need to know how to set up those back end, the programming and the codes and the tagging that Ryan also talked about.
Yep. So it's safe
With
to
a
say
lot of
this is,
people.
yep, definitely a cross collaborative,
Yes.
multi-layered, if you will.
Well,
So another question that came in, is this solely just for like front-facing sites, or does this apply to maybe like a member self-services portal, or sites that employers use or anything like that?
my understanding is it's for all sites, whether it's internal or external. The only exceptions would be those ones that we went over on the earlier slide. So if the member self-service one is something that's like behind a login, then that would be excluded. Of course, check with your own compliance and legal team to confirm that, but based on the rules that I've seen so far, that password protected type information is on that exclusion list.
Yep, that's actually, yes, a very good point. One that we should add to that previous list is legal, because that will be important for them
True,
to,
right?
especially when we're talking about those exempted items, knowing, making sure that they're comfortable with the list of items that we're going to intentionally exempt from this list of items that we're going to make accessible. Right. So making sure that everyone's on the same page of your organization's interpretation of the rule or any applicable law, so that you all could be on the same page and no one gets blindsided in the future.
Yep, and I think we have time for one or two more questions, but here's one to wrap things up. Does this apply to every retirement system?
I believe so. It depends on the timing is what's different by the size of the population.
All right. And then a comment to circle back around to how we discussed that it was a cross collaborative approach. Someone mentioned our comms team is partnering with IT in multiple business areas that are responsible for web content and or managing relationships with vendors that provide linked microsites, applications, and PDFs. So there's an example right there. And we have come to the completion of our Q&A portion. And I'm going to pass it back over to Diane and Ryan to close things out with any key takeaways.
Sure. I just want to say thank you, everyone. I appreciate the time. It's been great sharing this time with you this afternoon. Appreciate all the questions that came in. I did want to point out that, our contact information is on the slide if you want to reach out. I believe Jessica posted a copy of the slides out on the website. Just wanted to call out this last slide too as a quick takeaway. It shows a quick overview of some accessibility features and the types of pieces that they apply to. So be sure that might be a quick, easy reference for folks to print out and have handy. Ryan, do you want to share some final thoughts?
Sure. I'd remind everyone that this is, it can be a pretty daunting task. It can be difficult, but it is important to stick with it, get a little bit better each day, get a little bit further towards your path to compliance every day, and remember why we're doing this. I could speak for FPPA. We believe that it's important for everyone to have the same access to information and tools, regardless of their ability. That applies to the whole of our membership, but certainly including the 15,000 members of our D&D plan, including a few thousand retirees. We have pensioners approaching or beyond 100 years old that might need some assistance. So we're just trying to make sure that all of our members can consume our content if they need it, and we encourage y'all to do the same.
And I think that's a great way to close it out, remembering your why. And I just want to thank Ryan and Diane for this amazing session today. And I want to thank everyone who joined us today with their questions to keep the conversation going. And while the webinar has come to an end, the conversation has not. You see Diane and Ryan's emails on the screen. And I just want to share a reminder that the webinar is recorded and we'll be sharing it post webinar. And before the session closes out, you'll be prompted with a post-webinar survey. So please feel free to fill that out. And if you have any questions after today, please reach out to us at education@ncpers.org. And thank you and have a great afternoon.
Great. Thank you,
Thank you.
Jessica. Thanks, Ryan. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
All right, thank you.
Bye now.